I'm sorry, but this lounge is for first-class passengers only. You'll need to wait at your gate." The words hit like ice water on a summer day. Victoria Pemberton stood behind the marble reception desk of the Premium Sky Lounge at LAX, her perfectly manicured fingers drumming against the polished surface. Her blonde hair was swept into an elegant chignon, her designer blazer hugged her curves in all the right places, and her silk blouse caught the ambient lighting like it was crafted by angels. She looked like she belonged in a boardroom or on a magazine cover. She definitely looked like someone who had never been told no in her life. The woman standing across from her couldn't have been more different. Dr. Zara Mitchell, 31, wore faded jeans, a simple gray sweater, and white sneakers that had seen better days. Her natural hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, and she carried a worn leather messenger bag that looked like it had traveled around the world twice. She didn't look like someone who belonged in a first-class lounge. But appearances, as Victoria was about to learn, can be devastatingly deceptive. Before we dive into this story that's about to change everything you think you know about power and respect, I want to know where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments below. And if you believe that dignity should never depend on designer labels, hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. Because what happens in the next 20 minutes will remind you why judging people by their appearance is the most expensive mistake you can make. It was Friday, 6:30 p.m. at Los Angeles International Airport. The Premium Sky Lounge was Apex Airlines' crown jewel, a sanctuary of marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and leather furniture that whispered exclusivity. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a stunning view of the runway where jets lined up like expensive toys waiting for their turn to take flight. The air smelled of expensive coffee and privilege. Zara calmly reached into her bag and pulled out her boarding pass. She slid it across the marble counter with the practiced patience of someone who had been through this dance before. First class to New York, seat 2A. Victoria picked up the boarding pass like it might contaminate her freshly applied nail polish. She squinted at it, tilted it toward the light, and then looked at Zara with the kind of expression usually reserved for finding gum stuck to the bottom of your shoe. This doesn't look right. What exactly doesn't look right about it? Zara's voice was calm, professional. She had learned long ago that staying composed was the most powerful weapon against discrimination. Victoria's lips curled into what might charitably be called a smile. Well, for starters, these boarding passes can be, how should I put this, easily manipulated. We've had issues with people trying to use fake documents to access premium services. The lounge wasn't crowded, but it wasn't empty either. A businessman in an expensive suit looked up from his laptop. A woman in designer clothes paused her phone conversation. An elderly couple sharing a bottle of wine turned their attention to the unfolding drama. Nobody said anything yet, but you could feel the tension starting to build like static electricity before a storm. "Are you suggesting my boarding pass is fake?" Zara asked, her tone still level but with an edge that could cut glass. Victoria straightened her blazer and lifted her chin. "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm simply following protocol. We need additional verification for unusual circumstances." "And what exactly makes my circumstances unusual?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Victoria's cheeks flushed slightly, but her voice remained steady. "We just need to be thorough. I'm sure you understand. Security and all that." But Zara did understand. She understood perfectly. She had been understanding for 31 years. Behind Victoria, a young Hispanic man emerged from the back office. Miguel Santos, 26, wore the same Apex Airlines uniform, but somehow it looked different on him. Less armor, more actual work clothes. His dark eyes held the kind of intelligence that comes from paying attention to details, and right now those details were telling him that his boss was about to step in something she couldn't scrape off her designer heels. "Victoria, is everything okay out here?" Miguel's voice carried a gentle professionalism that contrasted sharply with his manager's Arctic demeanor. "Everything's fine, Miguel. Just doing our due diligence." Victoria didn't take her eyes off Zara. "Miss Dr. Mitchell?" Zara supplied. "Dr. Mitchell claims to have a first-class ticket, but as you know, we've had issues with fraudulent documents. I'm just being cautious." Miguel glanced at the boarding pass, then at Zara, then back at Victoria. His expression suggested he was trying to solve a math problem where the numbers didn't add up. "It looks legitimate to me, Victoria. The barcode scanned properly at the gate. Right? Dr. Mitchell?" "Yes, it did." Zara's gratitude for Miguel's intervention showed in the slight softening of her expression. Victoria's jaw tightened. "Miguel, perhaps you could check on the coffee station. I think the Ethiopian blend needs refreshing." It wasn't a suggestion. Miguel hesitated for a moment, clearly uncomfortable with being dismissed, but ultimately nodded and moved toward the beverage area. As he walked away, he caught Zara's eye and offered the smallest of apologetic shrugs. A young white woman approached the desk, her Apex Airlines name tag reading Rebecca Walsh. At 23, Rebecca looked like she had just graduated from college and still believed that following the rules would always lead to fair outcomes. Her nervous energy suggested she was about to learn otherwise. "Victoria, the Martinez family in Section 3 is asking about their departure time. Should I, Rebecca? Perfect timing. I need you to call security. We may have a situation here." Rebecca's eyes widened. She looked at Zara, who was still standing calmly with her hands folded, then back at Victoria. "Security. What kind of situation?" "Potential document fraud. Just protocol." Victoria's voice had taken on the crisp efficiency of someone who enjoyed wielding authority. From his position near the coffee station, Miguel's head snapped up. The businessman with the laptop was now openly staring. The woman on the phone had ended her call to watch the proceedings. The elderly couple looked increasingly uncomfortable. Rebecca pulled out her radio with shaking hands. Are you sure she seems Rebecca?" Victoria's voice could have frozen water. "Are you questioning my judgment?" "No, ma'am, Then make the call." As Rebecca reluctantly reached for her radio, a new voice cut through the tension. "Excuse me, but what exactly is happening here?" The voice belonged to Carlos Rivera, a 35-year-old Hispanic businessman who had been working quietly at a corner table. He approached the desk with the measured stride of someone accustomed to boardrooms and difficult conversations. His suit was expensive but not flashy, his presence commanding but not aggressive. "Sir, this is a private matter between the lounge staff and this guest." Victoria's pause before the word guest could have filled a canyon. Carlos glanced at Zara, then at the boarding pass still lying on the counter. "I couldn't help but notice that the lady has been standing here for several minutes with what appears to be a valid boarding pass. I'm just curious about the delay." "Mr. Rivera, isn't it?" Victoria's tone suggested she knew exactly who Carlos was and expected that knowledge to end the conversation. "I appreciate your concern, but this doesn't involve you." Carlos pulled out his phone. "You're right, it doesn't involve me directly. But I've been flying with Apex for 15 years, and I've never seen a passenger with proper documentation treated like this. Mind if I document the process? You know, for quality assurance." Victoria's composure cracked slightly. "Sir, recording in the lounge is against policy." "Interesting. I don't recall signing any agreement to that effect, and I believe public areas have different recording laws, don't they?" Carlos's smile was polite but sharp enough to draw blood. Near the windows, another passenger had pulled out her phone. Amanda Foster, 28, was a travel blogger with 50,000 Instagram followers and a nose for stories that went viral. Her fingers were already dancing across her screen as she live-tweeted the unfolding drama. "This is fascinating," Amanda murmured just loud enough to be heard. "Never seen anything quite like this at Apex Airlines." #lounge drama. Victoria's face was beginning to match her blazer, a shade of red that suggested internal temperature rising. She turned to Rebecca, who was still standing frozen with her radio halfway to her mouth. "Rebecca, I told you to call security. Now." But before Rebecca could respond, James Peterson appeared at the lounge entrance. At 29, James was Apex Airlines' senior security officer for this terminal. His presence was typically reassuring, calm professionalism wrapped in a uniform that suggested competence rather than aggression. Today, however, he looked like a man who had been called to referee a fight he didn't understand. "Ladies, gentlemen, I understand there's some kind of issue here." James's voice carried the patient tone of someone who had dealt with everything from lost luggage to unruly passengers to actual security threats. This situation, however, didn't seem to fit any of those categories. Victoria straightened, clearly relieved to have backup. "James, thank goodness. We have a potential fraud situation. This woman is claiming to have a first-class ticket, but I have serious doubts about its authenticity." James looked at Zara, who had remained remarkably calm throughout the escalating circus. "Ma'am, may I see your boarding pass and ID, please?" Zara handed over both documents without hesitation. James examined them with the thoroughness of someone who knew what to look for. He checked the barcode, examined the printing, verified the holographic security features. After a full minute of inspection, he looked up with a puzzled expression. These appear to be completely legitimate. Ticket was purchased 3 days ago with a platinum credit card. Seat assignment was made at booking. Gate check-in was completed 45 minutes ago. He handed the documents back to Zara. "I'm not seeing any red flags here." Victoria's face went through several shades of crimson. "James, surely you understand that we can't be too careful. These documents can be sophisticated forgeries. Ma'am, with respect, I've been doing this for 8 years. This is a genuine Apex Airlines boarding pass for a paid first-class seat. I'm not sure what the issue is." Carlos held up his phone. "The issue seems to be that Dr. Mitchell doesn't look like Victoria's idea of a first-class passenger." "That's completely untrue." Victoria's voice rose an octave. "This has nothing to do with appearance. It's about security protocols and what exactly triggered your security concerns?" The question came from the elderly gentleman sharing wine with his wife. Dr. William Patterson was 72 years old, a retired federal judge, and someone who had spent decades recognizing discrimination when he saw it. "Because from where I'm sitting, this young lady presented valid documentation and has been nothing but polite." His wife, Margaret Patterson, nodded agreement. "We've been watching the whole thing, dear. The only security issue we can see is the way this woman is being treated." Victoria looked around the lounge and realized that every single person was now watching her. Carlos was recording. Amanda was live tweeting. The Pattersons were providing commentary like judicial observers. Miguel was hovering nearby with an expression that screamed disapproval. Even Rebecca looked like she wanted to disappear into the marble floor. This is simply standard operating procedure," Victoria stammered. "For everyone?" Zara asked quietly. "Or just for people who look like me?" The question landed like a meteor in the middle of the lounge. Even the background music seemed to pause. What none of them knew was that Dr. Zara Mitchell had every right to be in that lounge. Not just because of her boarding pass, but because she owned it. 3 years earlier, Zara had sold her artificial intelligence company, ZDM Technologies, to Microsoft for $2. $8 billion. The sale had made her one of the youngest black female billionaires in history and had given her the financial power to pursue her true passion, fixing broken industries from the inside out. 6 months ago, she had quietly purchased a controlling stake in Apex Airlines. Not for profit, but for purpose. The company had been struggling with customer satisfaction scores, plagued by complaints about discriminatory treatment of minority passengers and hemorrhaging talent among diverse staff members. The previous board had been content to treat these issues as public relations problems rather than moral imperatives. Zara had different plans. Today's visit wasn't accidental. For the past month, she had been conducting undercover audits of Apex facilities, flying as a regular passenger to see how the company treated people who didn't fit the traditional profile of premium travelers. She had experienced subtle discrimination at other locations, but nothing as blatant as what was happening right now. Victoria Pemberton had built her career on maintaining what she called lounge standards. In practice, this meant creating an environment where wealthy white passengers felt comfortable by ensuring that people who didn't look like them were scrutinized, delayed, or turned away entirely. She had perfected the art of discriminatory gatekeeping while maintaining plausible deniability. Her methods were sophisticated, extended verification processes for minorities, selective interpretation of policies, and the creation of bureaucratic barriers that gave her legal cover while achieving her discriminatory goals. She had been promoted twice in 5 years based on customer satisfaction scores that reflected the comfort of her preferred clientele rather than fair treatment of all passengers. Miguel Santos, meanwhile, had been documenting these patterns for months. As assistant manager, he saw every incident, every complaint, every questionable decision. He had tried raising concerns with regional management, but Victoria's performance metrics and political connections had protected her. He was walking a tightrope between his conscience and his career, and today that rope was starting to fray. The Premium Sky Lounge itself was Apex Airlines' flagship customer experience designed to showcase the company's commitment to luxury and service. The irony wasn't lost on Zara that the space she had indirectly funded through her investment was being used as a weapon against the very people she was trying to protect. Her strategy today was simple: give them every opportunity to do the right thing, document their choices, let their actions speak for themselves. She had learned through years of facing discrimination that the most powerful response was often the calmest one. When people revealed their bias, the best thing you could do was let them finish revealing it. The stakes were higher than anyone in the lounge realized. This wasn't just about one woman being denied access to overpriced coffee and comfortable seating. This was about corporate culture training failures and the daily indignities faced by millions of travelers who didn't fit someone else's narrow definition of who belonged in premium spaces. Zara had the power to fire everyone in the room. But first, she wanted to see who would choose to do the right thing when they thought nobody important was watching. Because somebody important was always watching. The question was whether they would realize it before it was too late. Victoria surveyed the room and realized she was in too deep to back down now. Every instinct should have been telling her to apologize and welcome Dr. Mitchell into the lounge, but pride and prejudice had formed a toxic alliance in her mind. She was going to double down. Dr. Mitchell, I appreciate everyone's input, but I still need additional verification before I can grant you access to our premium facilities. Victoria's voice carried the artificial sweetness of someone trying to sound reasonable while being completely unreasonable. What kind of additional verification? Zara asked. Victoria reached under the counter and pulled out a thick binder. Our enhanced security protocols require multiple forms of identification for first-class passengers whose documentation raises any questions. Miguel stepped closer, his expression troubled. Victoria, I've never seen you use that binder before. What enhanced protocols? Miguel, please return to your duties, Victoria snapped, without taking her eyes off Zara. Dr. Mitchell, I'll need to see a government-issued ID, a credit card matching your name, and a secondary form of identification, such as a work badge or professional license. Zara reached into her bag and calmly produced her driver's license and credit card. I don't travel with my work credentials. Is this sufficient? Victoria examined the credit card with theatrical intensity, turning it over multiple times, as if searching for evidence of forgery. This is a Centurion card. Those are quite rare. May I ask where you obtained it? The audacity of the question sent a ripple of shock through the watching passengers. Carlos lowered his phone for a moment, his mouth agape. Did she just ask where you got your credit card? I heard that too. Margaret Patterson said loudly. In 40 years of travel, I have never heard anyone ask such a thing. Amanda's fingers flew across her phone screen as she updated her Twitter thread. This is insane. Apex Airlines lounge manager just asked a black woman where she got her Amex Black Card. This is so racist, it's almost a parody. Hashtag Apex Airlines bias. Hashtag travel. While Black Victoria's face reddened, but she pressed on. Ma'am, these cards have annual fees of several $1,000s. I'm just ensuring. Ensuring what exactly? Dr. Patterson's judicial voice cut through Victoria's explanation like a scalpel. That a black woman couldn't possibly afford a premium credit card. That her financial success must be fraudulent. Sir, I am not making this about race. Then what are you making it about? Zara's voice remained calm, but her question hung in the air like a challenge. Because I've provided every document you've requested. I've answered every question. I've been polite and patient. What exactly are you looking for that you haven't found? Rebecca Walsh had been standing frozen throughout this exchange. Her radio still clutched in her hand. She looked like she was watching a car accident in slow motion, unable to look away but horrified by what she was seeing. Rebecca Victoria commanded, "Please run the credit card through our verification system." Rebecca looked between Victoria and the growing crowd of concerned passengers. But Victoria, we don't verify customer credit cards unless they're making purchases. Dr. Mitchell is just trying to access the lounge with her boarding pass. Rebecca, are you questioning my authority again? The 23-year-old's hands shook as she took the credit card. She had worked at Apex for 8 months and had never seen anything like this. Every training session had emphasized customer service respect and creating a welcoming environment. This felt like the opposite of everything she had been taught. As Rebecca reluctantly swiped the card through their system, Miguel approached Victoria with barely contained frustration. Victoria, this is wrong. You know this is wrong. She has a valid boarding pass, valid ID, and you're putting her through verification processes that don't even exist in our manual. Miguel, if you can't support my decisions, perhaps you should reconsider your position here. The threat was clear, and Miguel felt the familiar weight of choosing between his job and his conscience. But as he looked at Zara standing patiently while being subjected to humiliating scrutiny, and then at the other passengers who were witnessing institutional bias in real time, something inside him shifted. You know what, Victoria? I've been reconsidering my position here for months. Ever since I started noticing that your enhanced verification only seems to apply to certain passengers. The lounge fell dead silent. Even the background jazz seemed to pause. Victoria's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. Miguel, you are walking a very thin line. Maybe it's time someone walked that line. Miguel replied, his voice growing stronger. Because what you're doing to this woman is discrimination, plain and simple. Carlos held up his phone again. And it's all being recorded. Miguel, you have more integrity in your little finger than your boss has in her entire body. Amanda had stopped typing to watch the confrontation unfold. This was better than anything she could have scripted. Her live Twitter thread was already being retweeted hundreds of times, and the hashtag Apex Airlines bias was starting to trend. Rebecca returned with the credit card, her face pale. The card is valid. The account is... well, it's definitely valid. More than valid. Victoria snatched the card back and handed it to Zara with obvious reluctance. Fine, but we still need additional verification. Dr. Mitchell, can you provide documentation of your employment or proof of income sufficient to afford first-class travel? The question was so outrageous that it sparked immediate outrage from the watching passengers. Are you out of your mind? Carlos exploded. You don't ask passengers for proof of income. This is absolutely discriminatory, Dr. Patterson declared. Young lady, I'm a retired federal judge, and what I'm witnessing here is a clear violation of civil rights laws. I'm posting every word of this, Amanda announced. My followers need to see how Apex Airlines treats their customers. Margaret Patterson stood up from her table. Victoria, dear, I've been flying for longer than you've been alive, and I have never seen such appalling behavior from airline staff. This woman has shown you everything you could possibly need, and you're treating her like a criminal. Zara watched this defense with a mixture of gratitude and sadness. She appreciated these strangers standing up for her, but she was also keenly aware that she shouldn't need defenders. The fact that multiple witnesses were required to validate her humanity was exhausting. I understand your concerns, Victoria said to the room, her voice strained, but I have a responsibility to maintain the security and exclusivity of this lounge. We've had incidents. What incidents? Miguel interrupted. I've worked here for 3 years. Victoria, what specific incidents are you referring to? Victoria's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. She couldn't cite specific incidents because there hadn't been any. Her enhanced security was nothing more than institutionalized prejudice dressed up as policy. I don't have to justify my security protocols to you, Miguel. And I certainly don't have to justify them to... Victoria gestured vaguely at the assembled passengers, outside observers. James Peterson, who had been quietly observing this train wreck, finally stepped forward. Ma'am, with all due respect, you kind of do. I'm corporate security for this terminal, and what I'm seeing here doesn't match any protocol I've been trained on. Dr. Mitchell has valid identification, a valid boarding pass, and a valid credit card. By what authority are you denying her access? Victoria looked around the room and realized that every single person was against her. But instead of recognizing that she might be wrong, her defensive instincts kicked into overdrive. By the authority of maintaining standards, she said stiffly. This lounge serves a very specific clientele, and we work hard to ensure that everyone feels comfortable and secure. Everyone? Zara asked quietly. Or just certain people? Victoria's answer would have been revealing. But she was interrupted by the arrival of additional passengers who had heard about the commotion through social media. Word was spreading that something extraordinary was happening at the Apex Premium Lounge. As more passengers gathered to witness the unfolding drama, Victoria realized she needed to regain control of the situation. Her power trip had become a public spectacle, but instead of recognizing the problem, she decided to escalate. James, I need you to escort Dr. Mitchell from the premises. She's been disruptive and is making other passengers uncomfortable. James Peterson looked around the lounge with the expression of a man who had just been asked to arrest the wind. Ma'am, she's been standing quietly while you've questioned her documentation. The only disruption I see is the line of questioning itself. Are you refusing to follow my directives? Victoria's voice had taken on a shrill edge that suggested panic masquerading as authority. I'm questioning directives that don't make sense, James replied calmly. Ma'am, I can't remove someone from a public space for having valid documentation and behaving appropriately. That's not how this works. Carlos had moved closer to the desk, his phone capturing every word. James, you're a good man. Don't let her turn you into part of this discrimination. Discrimination! Victoria's voice rose to a near shriek. This has nothing to do with discrimination. This is about security and standards and race, Dr. Patterson interrupted. Let's call it what it is. You've subjected this young woman to scrutiny that you would never impose on a white passenger with identical documentation. Margaret Patterson nodded vigorously. We've been sitting here for 2 hours, dear. We've seen dozens of passengers come and go. Not one of them was asked to verify their credit card or prove their income. Amanda looked up from her phone where she was now live streaming the incident on Instagram in addition to her Twitter commentary. I've got 3,000 people watching this live stream right now, and they're all asking the same question. Why is this woman being treated differently? Victoria spun toward Amanda like a tornado seeking a target. "Ma'am, you need to stop recording immediately. This is a private lounge with strict privacy policies." "Actually, it's not private," Miguel interjected. "It's a public accommodation operated by a company that serves the public, and there's no policy against recording." Victoria's face went through several shades of red. "Miguel, you are terminated. Effective immediately. Security, please escort Mr. Santos from the premises." The declaration hit the room like a thunderclap. Miguel had just been fired for telling the truth, and everyone had witnessed it. "You can't fire me for stating facts," Miguel said, his voice shaking but determined. "And you certainly can't fire me for refusing to participate in discrimination." James looked at Victoria with barely concealed disgust. "Ma'am, I'm not removing anyone from this lounge without proper cause. Mr. Santos hasn't violated any policies, and neither has Dr. Mitchell." Rebecca Walsh, who had been frozen in horror throughout this escalation, finally found her voice. "Victoria, this is wrong. Everything about this is wrong. Miguel was just trying to do the right thing." "Rebecca, would you like to join Miguel in the unemployment line?" The threat was clear, but Rebecca surprised everyone, including herself, by straightening her shoulders. "You know what? Maybe I would. Because what you're doing is horrible, and I don't want to be part of it." Carlos whistled softly. "Victoria, you've just fired 2 employees for refusing to discriminate. I hope you realize that's illegal in about 50 different ways. And it's all been recorded," Amanda added, holding up her phone. "Every threat, every illegal firing, every discriminatory statement. My live stream has gone viral. Hashtag Apex Airlines bias is trending nationwide." Victoria looked around the room and realized that her authority had completely evaporated. Passengers were openly criticizing her. Her own employees had turned against her. Security was refusing her orders, and the entire incident was being broadcast to thousands of people online. But instead of backing down, she made the worst possible choice. She doubled down again. "Fine. Fine. If no one will help me maintain proper standards, I'll handle this myself." Victoria reached for the phone behind the desk. "I'm calling airport security. Dr. Mitchell, you have 60 seconds to leave voluntarily, or you'll be removed by force." The collective intake of breath from the watching crowd was audible. Victoria had just threatened to have a woman arrested for the crime of being black in a first-class lounge. Zara, who had maintained her composure throughout this entire ordeal, finally allowed a small smile to cross her lips. "Victoria, before you make that call, I think there's something you should know." "There's nothing you can say that will change my mind." Victoria snapped her hand, hovering over the phone. "I believe there is." Zara reached into her messenger bag and pulled out her cell phone. "Because I think it's time I made a call of my own." The watching crowd leaned forward. Miguel and Rebecca exchanged glances. James stepped closer. Even Amanda paused her live stream to focus on whatever was about to happen. "Who are you calling?" Victoria demanded. "Your lawyer." "Some activist organization, the NAACP. Because I can tell you right now that—" "Actually," Zara said, calmly, "I'm calling David." Victoria laughed harshly. "David, your boyfriend is going to come save you." Zara scrolled through her contacts and tapped a number. As the phone began to ring, she looked directly into Victoria's eyes. "David Thompson. He's Apex Airlines' head of customer experience. I think he'll be very interested to hear about the customer experience you're providing today." Victoria's laugh died in her throat. You don't know David Thompson." "Actually, I do." The phone clicked as someone answered. "David, it's Zara. I'm sorry to call you on a Friday evening, but we have a situation at LAX that requires immediate attention." The color drained from Victoria's face as she realized that Dr. Mitchell wasn't bluffing. She actually had David Thompson's personal phone number. And he was actually taking her call. As Zara spoke quietly into her phone, Victoria's mind raced to process this development. Dr. Mitchell knew David Thompson personally. That could mean several things, none of them good for Victoria's career prospects. David, I'm currently in the Premium Sky Lounge at LAX, where your lounge manager has spent the last 30 minutes subjecting me to discriminatory treatment based on my race. Zara's voice was calm and professional, but loud enough for everyone to hear. She's demanded verification of my income, questioned the legitimacy of my credit card, threatened to have me arrested, and fired 2 employees for refusing to participate in her discrimination. Victoria could hear a voice on the other end of the phone, but couldn't make out the words. Whatever David Thompson was saying, it wasn't making Zara angry. If anything, she looked satisfied. No, I don't want to handle this privately, Zara continued. This behavior is happening in front of customers and being broadcast live to thousands of people. This is exactly the kind of institutional bias we've discussed addressing. The phrase we've discussed sent a chill down Victoria's spine. Who was this woman? How did she know David Thompson well enough to have discussions about corporate policy? Miguel stepped closer to Rebecca, who looked like she was about to faint. I think, Miguel whispered, we're about to find out exactly who Dr. Mitchell really is. James Peterson had pulled out his own phone and was quickly Googling Dr. Zara Mitchell. His expression shifted from curiosity to shock to something approaching awe as he read the search results. Carlos noticed James's reaction. James, who is she? James showed Carlos his phone screen. Carlos's eyes widened, and he immediately shared the information with Amanda, whose live stream audience was growing by the minute. Oh my God, Amanda whispered into her phone. Viewers, you are not going to believe this. Dr. Zara Mitchell. She sold her company for nearly $3 billion. She's one of the youngest black female billionaires in history. The information rippled through the growing crowd of onlookers. Passengers who had been watching out of curiosity suddenly realized they were witnessing something much bigger than a customer service dispute. Victoria, meanwhile, was experiencing what psychologists call cognitive dissonance in real time. Everything she believed about who belonged in premium spaces was crashing against the reality that she had just discriminated against someone with more money and power than she would ever see in her lifetime. Yes, David, I understand. Zara continued her phone conversation. How long until you can get here? 20 minutes, perfect. And David, bring legal and HR. We're going to need a comprehensive review of policies and training. Victoria's hands started shaking. The mention of legal and HR suggested that this situation was moving beyond customer service into employment law territory. And given that she had just fired 2 employees and threatened a customer with arrest all in front of witnesses and live cameras, her legal exposure was becoming significant. Dr. Patterson approached the desk with the measured steps of someone who had presided over similar situations in courtrooms. Victoria, as someone who spent 30 years on the federal bench, I strongly advise you to stop talking immediately and seek legal counsel. I don't need legal counsel, Victoria snapped, but her voice lacked its earlier conviction. I was following established protocols. Show me the protocols. Miguel interrupted. Show us all the policy manual that says customers should be asked for proof of income. Show us the training materials that say black passengers require enhanced verification. Victoria looked desperately at Rebecca for support, but Rebecca was backing away from the desk like it was contaminated. Victoria, I can't support this. I've never seen these protocols you keep mentioning. Zara ended her phone call and turned to face the room. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank everyone who spoke up during this incident. Your willingness to witness and document discrimination makes it impossible to ignore or deny. She looked directly at Victoria. Victoria David Thompson is on his way with members of Apex Airlines legal and human resources teams. They'll be here in 20 minutes to conduct a full investigation of this incident. Victoria's last desperate attempt at maintaining control was to reach for the lounge policies binder again. Dr. Mitchell, regardless of whoever you claim to know, I still have the authority to maintain the standards of this facility according to what Zara asked. Please read us the exact policy that authorizes racial discrimination. Show us the training manual that teaches employees to question black customers' financial credentials. I'm genuinely curious to see these documents. Victoria opened the binder with trembling hands, frantically flipping through pages. But as Miguel had suspected, there were no policies supporting her behavior. The actual Apex Airlines customer service guidelines emphasized respect, dignity, and equal treatment for all passengers. The policies are, this is about security, not race. Victoria stammered. Carlos held up his phone, which was still recording. Victoria, in the last hour, you've asked a black woman to prove her income, questioned her credit card, threatened her with arrest, and fired 2 employees for defending her. If this isn't about race, what exactly is it about? Margaret Patterson shook her head sadly. Dear, you've dug yourself into a hole so deep that even a ladder won't help you now. Amanda's live stream comments were flying by faster than she could read them, but the general sentiment was clear. Thousands of people were watching Victoria's career end in real time, and they were not sympathetic. The thing is, Miguel said, addressing the room rather than Victoria, this isn't the first time. I've been documenting incidents like this for months. Dr. Mitchell is just the first person with the resources and connections to hold Victoria accountable. Rebecca nodded miserably. He's right. I've seen Victoria treat other customers differently based on how they looked. I just never spoke up because I was scared. James Peterson closed his phone and looked at Victoria with professional disappointment. Ma'am, I've reviewed the actual Apex Airlines customer service policies on my phone. Nothing you've done in the last hour aligns with company guidelines. In fact, most of it directly violates federal anti-discrimination laws. Victoria slumped against the desk as the full weight of her situation became clear. She had discriminated against a billionaire in front of multiple witnesses, fired employees, illegally violated company policies, and done it all while being recorded and broadcast live to thousands of people. But the worst part was still to come. As word spread through social media that something extraordinary was happening at the Apex Airlines lounge, more passengers began arriving to witness the aftermath. The Premium Sky Lounge, which was designed to be an oasis of calm exclusivity, had become the center of a viral civil rights moment. Zara looked around at the growing crowd and made a decision. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to address what just happened here, because I think it's important for everyone to understand the broader implications. She moved away from the desk to the center of the seating area where everyone could see and hear her clearly. Amanda immediately adjusted her phone camera to capture whatever was coming next. 15 minutes ago, I walked into this lounge with a valid boarding pass just like any other passenger. I was subjected to enhanced verification processes that aren't applied to other customers asked to prove my financial credentials, questioned about the legitimacy of my documents, and ultimately threatened with arrest. All of this happened because someone made assumptions about who I am based on my appearance. The crowd listened in respectful silence. Victoria stood behind the desk, looking like she wanted to disappear into the marble floor. This kind of discrimination happens every day to people who don't have the resources or platform to fight back. The only difference today is that you all witnessed it, recorded it, and refused to let it happen quietly. Carlos nodded emphatically. Dr. Mitchell, what you experienced was appalling, but your response was inspiring. You never lost your composure, never returned hostility with hostility. Because that's not who I am, Zara replied. But more importantly, responding with dignity and documentation is more powerful than responding with anger. When someone shows you who they really are, sometimes the best thing you can do is let them finish showing you. Margaret Patterson wiped away a tear. Sweetheart, you've handled this with more grace than I would have managed at your age. Dr. Patterson nodded agreement. In all my years on the bench, I rarely saw such clear-cut discrimination handled with such composure. You've created an excellent legal record. Miguel, who was still technically fired but hadn't actually left, approached Zara. Dr. Mitchell, I want to apologize, not just for Victoria's behavior, but for every time I witnessed something like this and didn't speak up strongly enough. Miguel, you did speak up today. You lost your job for defending a stranger. That takes real courage. Rebecca was crying openly now. I'm so sorry. I knew it was wrong, but I was scared of losing my job. I should have been stronger. Zara's expression softened. Rebecca, you're 23 years old in your first job out of college. Speaking up against authority figures is hard. The important thing is that you recognized what was happening and ultimately found your voice. James Peterson stepped forward. Dr. Mitchell, as terminal security. I want you to know that I'll be filing a full report on this incident. What happened here violates both company policy and federal law. Thank you, James. Documentation is crucial for preventing this from happening to others. Amanda looked up from her phone where the comments on her live stream were scrolling by impossibly fast. Dr. Mitchell, my followers want to know what happens next. How do we make sure this kind of discrimination doesn't continue? It was a perfect setup for Zara's next revelation. That's an excellent question, Amanda, and the answer is that change has to come from the top. It requires leadership that prioritizes inclusion over exclusivity, dignity over discrimination. She paused and looked directly at Victoria, who was still standing behind the desk like a defendant awaiting sentencing. It requires leaders who understand that a company's values aren't what they post on their website, but how they treat people when they think no one important is watching. Carlos lowered his phone for a moment. Dr. Mitchell, you said you knew David Thompson personally. How do you know Apex Airlines' head of customer experience? Zara smiled for the first time since this ordeal began. That's actually a very good question, Carlos. And I think the answer might surprise some people. She reached into her messenger bag and pulled out a slim leather folder. From it, she extracted what appeared to be some kind of identification badge or credential. The truth is, I know David Thompson because I hired him. She held up the badge so everyone could see it clearly. It was an Apex Airlines Board of Directors identification, complete with her photo name and an unmistakable title, board chair. The silence that followed was so complete that you could hear the air conditioning humming in the background. Victoria's face went from red to white so quickly that James stepped closer in case she fainted. Miguel's mouth fell open. Rebecca gasped audibly. Carlos's phone slipped slightly in his hand. Amanda, to her credit, kept her live stream running while whispering to her audience. Viewers, Dr. Zara Mitchell just revealed that she's not just a passenger. She's not just a billionaire. She's the board chair of Apex Airlines. The woman who was just discriminated against owns the company. Dr. Patterson started laughing, a rich, judicial chuckle that seemed to sum up the cosmic justice of the situation. Victoria, my dear, you have just discriminated against your own boss, in front of witnesses, on live television. Margaret Patterson was laughing too, but with sympathy rather than malice. Oh, honey, you didn't just step in it. You dove in, head first. Carlos resumed recording as he processed the magnitude of what had just been revealed. Dr. Mitchell, you're telling us that you own Apex Airlines and Victoria just subjected the board chair to racial discrimination, illegal questioning, and threats of arrest. Zara finished calmly. Yes, that's exactly what happened. Victoria finally found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. You're on the board. I'm not just on the board, Victoria. I chair it. Apex Airlines is my company. I bought controlling interest specifically to address the kind of discrimination you've demonstrated today. Miguel looked at Rebecca, then back at Zara. Does this mean we're not actually fired? Zara's smile was warm but firm. Miguel, you were never legally fired. Victoria doesn't have the authority to terminate board-approved employees for refusing to discriminate. In fact, what she did to you was wrongful termination, which is illegal. Rebecca's relief was visible. Thank you. I'm so sorry I didn't speak up sooner. Rebecca, you spoke up when it mattered. That's what counts. James Peterson straightened to attention. Ma'am, as terminal security, I need to know how would you like me to handle this situation going forward? Zara looked around the room at all the faces watching her. Some hopeful, some curious one absolutely terrified. What I'd like, James, is for David Thompson and the legal team to conduct a complete investigation when they arrive. I want every policy reviewed, every complaint examined, and every employee interviewed. Because what happened today isn't an isolated incident. It's symptomatic of a corporate culture that needs fundamental change. She turned to address Victoria directly for the first time since revealing her identity. Victoria, you had multiple opportunities to do the right thing. Every witness here gave you chances to recognize your mistake and correct it. Instead, you chose to escalate, discriminate, and retaliate. Those choices have consequences. Victoria's voice cracked as she spoke. Dr. Mitchell, I didn't know. If I had known who you were, if you had known I was rich and powerful, you would have treated me differently. Zara's voice was gentle, but piercing. Victoria, that's exactly the problem. Respect shouldn't depend on someone's bank account or board position. It should be universal. The approaching sound of footsteps in the corridor indicated that David Thompson and his team were arriving. Victoria's reckoning was about to begin, but for Zara this was just the start of a much larger transformation. David Thompson appeared at the lounge entrance like a man walking into a crime scene. At 45, he carried himself with the purposeful stride of someone who had been pulled away from dinner to handle what he assumed was a routine customer complaint. He was not prepared for what he was about to encounter. Behind him came Dr. Sarah Martinez, Vice President of Operations, and a woman who had worked with Zara to implement new diversity initiatives across the company. Bringing up the rear were 2 members of the legal team and a representative from Human Resources, all looking like they expected to spend 15 minutes soothing an upset passenger and then return to their Friday evening plans. They were wrong. David's eyes immediately found Zara in the center of the lounge, surrounded by passengers and staff in what appeared to be some kind of impromptu gathering. His expression shifted from confusion to recognition, to something approaching dread as he realized the implications. Zara. David said, his voice carrying a mixture of respect, concern, and barely controlled panic. I came as quickly as I could. Can you brief me on the situation? The use of Zara's first name, spoken with obvious familiarity and deference, was not lost on anyone in the room. Victoria, who had been hoping this was all some kind of elaborate misunderstanding, felt her last thread of hope snap. David, thank you for coming so quickly. I'd like you to meet the staff and passengers who have been dealing with this situation. Zara gestured to the assembled group. Everyone, this is David Thompson, Apex Airlines Head of Customer Experience. David nodded politely to the group, but his attention was focused on Zara. What can you tell me about what happened here? Before Zara could respond, Carlos stepped forward with his phone still recording. Mr. Thompson, I documented most of this incident. Dr. Mitchell was subjected to discriminatory treatment by your lounge manager for over an hour. Amanda held up her phone as well. I've been live streaming this whole thing. Thousands of people have watched Victoria discriminate against Dr. Mitchell in real time. David's face went pale as he began to understand the scope of what he was dealing with. This wasn't just a customer complaint. It was a public relations disaster that had been broadcast live to thousands of people. Dr. Martinez stepped forward and immediately recognized several passengers as witnesses. Her legal training kicked in as she began processing the evidentiary implications of having so many documented accounts of discriminatory behavior. Dr. Mitchell David said carefully, "Perhaps we could speak privately about no David." Zara's voice was firm, but not unkind. "This happened in public, it was witnessed by customers and employees, and it's being broadcast live. We're going to handle it transparently." Margaret Patterson nodded approvingly. Transparency is exactly what this situation needs. Dr. Patterson adjusted his glasses and looked at David with the expression of someone who had presided over similar situations many times. "Young man, I'm a retired federal judge, and what I witnessed here today was clear-cut racial discrimination, illegal retaliation against employees, and violation of civil rights laws." David's panic was now visible to everyone in the room. As head of customer experience, he was responsible for exactly the kind of experience that Zara had received, and having it happen to the board chair in public with extensive documentation was a nightmare scenario beyond his worst fears. "Zara, I am so sorry," David began. "This is absolutely not representative of our values or—" "David, save the corporate speak," Zara interrupted gently. "I'm not looking for apologies right now. I'm looking for accountability and change. Tell me, how many complaints have you received about discriminatory treatment at this location?" David looked like a man who had just been asked to calculate the exact moment his career ended. I'd need to review the files." Miguel stepped forward. "I can answer that. I've been documenting incidents for months. This location has received at least a dozen complaints about discriminatory treatment in the past 6 months alone." Rebecca nodded miserably. Miguel tried to raise concerns with regional management, but nothing ever changed. Dr. Martinez was taking notes furiously, her legal mind already calculating the company's exposure to civil rights violations and wrongful termination claims. James Peterson approached David with a thick folder. "Sir, I've been compiling security reports on questionable incidents. The patterns of discriminatory treatment are well documented." David looked around the room and realized that he wasn't just dealing with one incident, but with evidence of widespread institutionalized discrimination that had been ignored by management and was now exposed in the most public way possible. "Zara," he said quietly, "how do you want to handle this?" What everyone in the room was about to learn was that Zara had no intention of handling this quietly. She had spent months planning for exactly this moment, and every piece was falling into place. "David, I want you to meet some of the people who have been affected by the culture at this location." Zara gestured to Miguel. "Miguel Santos is your assistant lounge manager, a 3-year employee with excellent performance reviews who was fired today for refusing to participate in discrimination." Miguel stepped forward, his dignity intact despite everything he had endured. "Mr. Thompson, I've loved working for Apex Airlines, but I couldn't stand by and watch a customer being treated like that." "Miguel, you're not fired," David said immediately. "Any termination made under these circumstances would be wrongful and illegal." "Actually," Dr. Martinez interjected, "Mr. Santos may have grounds for a whistleblower protection claim. Firing an employee for refusing to discriminate is specifically prohibited under federal law," Zara continued. "David, I'd also like you to meet Rebecca Walsh, a young employee who ultimately found the courage to speak up despite fear of retaliation." Rebecca stepped forward, her hands shaking slightly. "Mr. Thompson, I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. I was scared, but I knew what Victoria was doing was wrong." "Rebecca, you did speak up when it mattered," David assured her. "That took real courage. And these," Zara gestured to the passengers, "are the witnesses who refused to let discrimination happen in silence." Carlos held up his phone, which was still recording. "Mr. Thompson, I've captured everything. The discriminatory questioning, the illegal firing, the threats of arrest. It's all documented." Amanda had paused her live stream to address David directly. "Mr. Thompson, This has gone viral. Hashtag Apex Airlines bias is trending nationally. How is your company going to respond to evidence of institutional discrimination? David looked at Dr. Martinez, who shook her head slightly, indicating that they were well beyond damage control at this point. Dr. Patterson approached the group with the measured steps of someone delivering a verdict. Mr. Thompson, as someone who spent 3 decades adjudicating civil rights cases, I can tell you that this incident represents one of the clearest examples of institutional discrimination I've ever witnessed outside a courtroom. Margaret Patterson nodded agreement, and it was all preventable. If Victoria had simply treated Dr. Mitchell with basic respect, none of this would have happened. David turned to look at Victoria, who had been standing silently behind the desk like a defendant awaiting sentencing. Victoria, I need to understand your perspective on what happened here. Victoria looked around the room at all the hostile faces, all the recording phones, all the evidence of her discriminatory behavior. She had 2 choices: take responsibility and hope for mercy, or double down and guarantee her destruction. She chose poorly. David, I was following established security protocols. Dr. Mitchell didn't fit the profile of our typical first-class passengers, and I was being cautious. These people are making this about race, when it was really about maintaining standards. The collective intake of breath from the room was audible. Even David closed his eyes in dismay at how thoroughly Victoria had just incriminated herself. Victoria, Dr. Martinez said, her legal training taking over, you just admitted to racial profiling and discriminatory enforcement of policies based on customer appearance. You're also acknowledging that Apex Airlines has different standards for passengers based on how they look. Zara stepped closer to Victoria, her voice calm but carrying the weight of absolute authority. Victoria, you've had multiple opportunities to take responsibility for your actions. Instead, you've doubled down on discrimination and blamed your victims. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. She turned to address David and Dr. Martinez. David, Sarah, I want a complete investigation of this location, including a review of all customer complaints, employee concerns, and discriminatory practices. I want every policy examined and every training program evaluated. David nodded immediately. Of course, we'll begin immediately. I also want a full audit of Victoria's hiring practices, performance evaluations, and any complaints filed against her. Dr. Martinez was taking detailed notes. We'll pull all HR files and employee feedback immediately. And I want to understand how 12 complaints about discriminatory treatment were filed and apparently ignored by regional management. David's face went even paler. The implications of ignored discrimination complaints were staggering from a legal perspective. Finally, Zara continued. I want to understand what training Victoria received that led her to believe that racial profiling was acceptable, that asking customers for proof of income was appropriate, and that firing employees for refusing to discriminate was legal. Victoria, realizing that her situation was becoming more desperate by the minute, made one final attempt to save herself. Dr. Mitchell, I had no idea who you were. If I had known you were on the board, I would never have Victoria stop, Zara said firmly. That's exactly the problem. You're saying that you would have treated me differently if you had known I was rich and powerful. But respect and dignity shouldn't depend on someone's wealth or position. They should be universal. Miguel nodded emphatically. That's what I tried to tell you, Victoria. Every customer deserves to be treated with respect. Rebecca was crying again. Victoria, you taught me that some customers were more important than others. I believed you because you were my boss. But that was wrong. James Peterson stepped forward with his security report. Sir, ma'am, the patterns are clear. Victoria consistently applied enhanced scrutiny to minority customers while expediting service for white passengers with identical documentation. Carlos held up his phone. Mr. Thompson, I've got video evidence of Victoria asking Dr. Mitchell to prove her income and questioning where she got her credit card. I've never seen anything like it. Amanda addressed her live stream audience. Viewers were watching corporate accountability in real time. This is what happens when discrimination is documented and confronted. Dr. Patterson looked at Victoria with something approaching pity. Young lady, you've made a series of choices that have led to this moment. The question now is whether you're going to take responsibility or continue to blame others. Margaret Patterson shook her head sadly. Victoria. Dear, you've dug yourself into a hole so deep that even honesty might not save you now. Dr. Martinez opened her briefcase and pulled out a tablet immediately, beginning the formal documentation process that would determine not just Victoria's fate, but potentially the legal exposure of the entire company. Dr. Mitchell, for the record. Can you walk me through exactly what happened from the moment you entered this lounge? Zara looked around the room at the assembled witnesses. I think it would be more valuable to hear from everyone who observed the incident. This wasn't just about what happened to me. It was about how an entire system failed. She gestured to Carlos. Carlos, you were one of the first passengers to recognize that something inappropriate was happening. Can you tell David and Sarah what you witnessed? Carlos consulted his phone, where he had been taking notes in addition to recording. I was working at that table when Dr. Mitchell approached the desk with her boarding pass. Victoria immediately began questioning her documentation in a way I'd never seen applied to other passengers. Can you be more specific about the differential treatment Dr. Martinez asked her legal training evident in the precision of her questioning? Victoria demanded additional verification, questioned the authenticity of Dr. Mitchell's credit card, and asked her to prove her income. In 3 years of flying with Apex, I've never seen any other passenger subjected to such scrutiny. Amanda looked up from her phone where she was reviewing her live stream footage. I captured Victoria asking Dr. Mitchell where she got her credit card and demanding proof of income sufficient for first-class travel. The exact quote was, "These cards have annual fees of several $1,000s. I'm just insuring." And then Dr. Mitchell asked what she was insuring. Dr. Martinez made detailed notes. Miss Foster, did you observe Victoria applying these same verification requirements to other passengers? I watched a white businessman check in immediately before Dr. Mitchell with identical documentation. He was welcomed warmly and escorted to his seat without any additional questions. David Thompson looked like a man watching his career crumble in real time. Zara, this is clearly discriminatory treatment. I'm appalled that this happened at any of our facilities, but especially that it happened to you. David, I'm not upset that it happened to me specifically. I'm upset that it happens at all. The problem isn't that I was discriminated against. It's that discrimination is apparently standard operating procedure at this location. Miguel stepped forward with a folder he had been carrying throughout the incident. Mr. Thompson, I've been documenting problems here for months. Victoria has a pattern of treating minority passengers differently, and when I tried to report it, I was told to focus on my own duties. Dr. Martinez took the folder and began reviewing Miguel's documentation. Her expression grew increasingly grave as she read through incident reports, customer complaints, and evidence of discriminatory practices. Miguel, this is extensive documentation. Why wasn't this information escalated to corporate headquarters? I tried. I filed reports with regional management, but Victoria has connections with the regional director. My complaints were dismissed as personality conflicts. Rebecca nodded miserably. Miguel tried to get me to document things too, but Victoria made it clear that speaking up would cost us our jobs. James Peterson presented his security files to Dr. Martinez. Ma'am, from a security perspective, the patterns are unmistakable. Victoria consistently flagged minority passengers for enhanced screening while expediting white passengers with identical or sometimes inferior documentation. Dr. Patterson adjusted his glasses and looked at Dr. Martinez with the authority of someone who had presided over similar cases. Dr. Martinez, as a former federal judge, I can tell you that what we witnessed here constitutes clear evidence of disparate treatment based on race illegal retaliation against employees and violation of public accommodation laws. Margaret Patterson nodded agreement. We saw discrimination happening in real time, documented by multiple witnesses and broadcast live. This isn't ambiguous or subjective. It's clear-cut illegal behavior. Dr. Martinez looked up from her notes, her expression grim. The legal exposure here is significant. We're looking at potential civil rights violations, wrongful termination claims, and possible federal investigation. David turned to Victoria, who had remained silent throughout this recitation of evidence. Victoria, in light of these allegations and witness testimony, do you have anything to add? Victoria looked around the room at all the hostile faces and made one last attempt to salvage her position. David, I was trying to maintain the exclusivity and security of our premium lounge. Our customers expect a certain standard, and I was working to ensure that people who belong here feel comfortable. The statement was so tone-deaf and discriminatory that it prompted immediate responses from multiple witnesses. People who belong here, Carlos repeated incredulously. Victoria, you're admitting that you don't think black people belong in first-class lounges? That's not what I said, Victoria protested, but her face was red with the knowledge that it was exactly what she had implied. Miguel shook his head in disgust. Victoria, you just admitted to discriminatory gatekeeping based on race. You're saying that maintaining exclusivity means keeping out certain types of people. Rebecca was crying again. Victoria, you taught me that some passengers didn't belong here. I thought you meant people without proper documentation. But now I realize you meant people who didn't look like our typical customers. Zara stepped closer to Victoria, her voice calm, but carrying absolute authority. Victoria, you've just admitted to discriminatory practices in front of multiple witnesses, including our legal team. You've acknowledged that you view first-class travel as something that certain people don't deserve based on their appearance. Dr. Martinez stopped taking notes and looked directly at Victoria. Miss Pemberton, you've just provided a clear admission of discriminatory intent. I strongly advise you to stop talking and seek legal counsel. But Victoria, realizing that her career was over, regardless, decided to go down swinging. Dr. Mitchell, you can fire me, but you can't change the fact that this lounge has standards. Our customers have expectations about the kind of environment they're paying for. The statement hung in the air like a confession written in smoke. David closed his eyes in complete dismay. Victoria, please stop talking. Dr. Patterson shook his head sadly. Young lady, you've just admitted to intentional discrimination based on customer race. That's not a personnel issue. That's a federal crime. Zara looked around the room at the assembled witnesses, the legal team, and the mountain of evidence that had been compiled in the space of 2 hours. This was the moment she had been working toward since acquiring controlling interest in Apex Airlines. Sarah, she addressed Dr. Martinez. I want you to personally oversee a comprehensive investigation of discriminatory practices throughout our organization. This incident didn't happen in isolation, and I want to understand the scope of the problem. Dr. Martinez nodded immediately. Of course. We'll conduct a complete audit of customer complaints, employee concerns, and policy implementation across all locations. David, I want you to work with Sarah to review our training programs, hiring practices, and management oversight. Clearly, there are gaps in our approach to preventing discrimination. David was taking detailed notes, his expression reflecting both professional concern and personal mortification. Absolutely. We'll examine every aspect of our customer service protocols. I also want to understand how Victoria was hired, promoted, and retained despite apparent patterns of discriminatory behavior. Someone in management either ignored these problems or actively enabled them. Dr. Martinez's legal training was evident in her systematic approach. We'll review all HR files, performance evaluations, and management communications regarding Victoria's employment. Miguel stepped forward with additional documentation. Mr. Thompson, I kept copies of all my complaint reports that were dismissed by regional management. The patterns go back at least 2 years. Rebecca nodded agreement. I have text messages from Victoria instructing me to apply different standards to different passengers. I saved them because something felt wrong. James Peterson presented additional security files. I have incident reports documenting questionable decisions, but they were never escalated because Victoria's performance metrics were strong. Carlos held up his phone, which contained hours of recorded evidence. Dr. Mitchell, I'm happy to provide all my recordings to your legal team. This needs to be documented thoroughly. Amanda addressed the group while continuing to broadcast live. I've captured everything on multiple platforms. The evidence is comprehensive and undeniable. Dr. Patterson looked at Dr. Martinez with judicial authority. Doctor, as someone who presided over civil rights cases, I can tell you that the evidence here is overwhelming. This isn't a he said, she said situation. It's extensively documented discrimination with multiple corroborating witnesses. Zara turned to Victoria one final time. Victoria, you have two choices now. You can take responsibility for your actions, cooperate with the investigation, and hope for whatever mercy the legal system might offer. Or you can continue to deny and deflect and face the full consequences of your behavior. Victoria looked around the room at all the evidence arrayed against her, all the witnesses to her discrimination, all the recordings of her admissions. She had destroyed her own career through a combination of prejudice, arrogance, and stubborn refusal to acknowledge wrongdoing. I want a lawyer, Victoria said quietly. Dr. Martinez nodded approvingly. That's the first smart thing you've said today. David turned to Zara with obvious concern. What do you want me to do about staffing here? We can't have Miguel and Rebecca running this location alone. Actually, Zara said I think Miguel would make an excellent lounge manager. He's demonstrated integrity, courage, and a genuine commitment to treating all customers with respect. Miguel's eyes widened in surprise. Dr. Mitchell, Thank you. I won't let you down. Rebecca, I'd like you to assist Miguel and help us develop training programs that prevent this kind of discrimination. Your experience as someone who was taught these biases and ultimately rejected them is valuable. Rebecca wiped her eyes, nodding enthusiastically. I'd be honored to help. I never want anyone to go through what you experienced today. James Peterson approached the group. Dr. Mitchell, what would you like me to do from a security perspective, James? I want you to work with our legal team to ensure that all security protocols are applied equally, regardless of passenger appearance. Your willingness to refuse illegal orders today shows exactly the kind of integrity we need. Dr. Martinez closed her notebook and looked at Zara. What about Victoria? Given the extensive evidence of discrimination and illegal retaliation, termination seems inevitable. Victoria will be terminated immediately for violation of company policies, federal anti-discrimination laws, and illegal retaliation against employees, Zara said firmly. She'll also face potential criminal charges for civil rights violations. David nodded gravely. I'll handle the termination paperwork immediately. I also want Victoria banned permanently from all Apex Airlines facilities and blacklisted from employment in the hospitality industry. Zara continued. Her behavior is so egregious that she shouldn't be allowed to discriminate against customers anywhere. Carlos looked up from his phone. Dr. Mitchell, what about the broader implications? This has gone viral. How is Apex Airlines going to respond to the public attention? Zara smiled for the first time since revealing her identity. Carlos, we're going to use this as an opportunity to demonstrate that accountability and change are possible. We're going to implement industry-leading anti-discrimination policies, comprehensive training programs, and transparent oversight mechanisms. Amanda addressed her live stream audience. Viewers, this is what corporate accountability looks like when leaders take responsibility for change instead of covering up problems. Dr. Patterson adjusted his glasses and looked at Zara with judicial approval. Dr. Mitchell, your response to this incident demonstrates exactly the kind of leadership that can create meaningful change. Margaret Patterson nodded agreement. You've turned a horrible experience into an opportunity to help others. That takes real character. Miguel stepped forward with obvious gratitude. Dr. Mitchell, thank you for not just standing up for yourself, but for creating change that will protect other passengers and employees. Rebecca was crying again, but this time from relief and gratitude. I feel like I can actually do my job with integrity now. Thank you for making that possible. As the investigation team prepared to escort Victoria from the premises and begin their comprehensive review of company practices, Zara realized that this moment represented exactly what she had hoped to achieve when she acquired Apex Airlines. Change was possible, justice could prevail, and dignity was non-negotiable. The termination of Victoria Pemberton was swift and decisive. Within 24 hours, her access to all Apex Airlines systems had been revoked, her employment officially terminated for cause, and a comprehensive legal review of her actions initiated. But the consequences extended far beyond one discriminatory manager, Dr. Martinez's investigation revealed a pattern of ignored complaints, dismissed concerns, and cultural tolerance for discriminatory behavior that shocked even Zara, who had suspected problems but not their extent. The regional management team that had protected Victoria faced immediate suspension pending review. The training programs that had failed to prevent discrimination were scrapped entirely. Federal authorities launched their own investigation after reviewing the extensive video evidence and witness testimony. Victoria faced potential criminal charges under civil rights laws, while Apex Airlines faced scrutiny from the Department of Transportation and the Department of Justice regarding company-wide practices. The media coverage was unprecedented. Within 48 hours, the story had been covered by every major news outlet, spawned countless social media discussions, and prompted congressional inquiries about discrimination in the airline industry. Amanda's live stream footage became the most watched customer service video in social media history. Victoria's legal troubles mounted quickly. The evidence against her was overwhelming video footage of discriminatory treatment, recorded admissions of racial bias, documented retaliation against employees, and testimony from multiple credible witnesses. Her attorney advised her to seek a plea agreement, acknowledging that fighting the charges would be futile given the extensive documentation. Carlos Rivera, whose recording had captured crucial evidence, was featured on national television discussing the importance of witnessing and documenting discrimination. His courage in speaking up inspired others to share their own experiences of airline discrimination. Dr. William and Margaret Patterson were interviewed by 60 Minutes about their observations of institutional bias. Their dignity and clear testimony provided a powerful counterpoint to claims that the incident was somehow ambiguous or misunderstood. Miguel Santos became a case study in whistleblower protection, receiving support from civil rights organizations and employment law advocates. His willingness to risk his career to defend a stranger earned him recognition as a model employee and moral leader. Rebecca Walsh's transformation from complicit bystander to courageous ally was highlighted in business schools as an example of how organizational culture can corrupt individuals and how leadership can inspire moral courage. James Peterson received commendation from law enforcement organizations for his refusal to participate in illegal activity despite pressure from his supervisors. His professional integrity became a model for security personnel throughout the industry. The financial consequences for Victoria were severe. In addition to criminal penalties, she faced a civil lawsuit seeking damages for discrimination, emotional distress, and violation of civil rights. Her homeowner's insurance declined to cover the lawsuit, leaving her personally liable for potentially millions in damages. Industry-wide, the incident prompted immediate policy reviews at competing airlines. No company wanted to be the next to face viral video evidence of discrimination. Training programs were updated, oversight mechanisms strengthened, and accountability measures implemented across the aviation sector. The Premium Sky Lounge at LAX was temporarily closed for comprehensive staff retraining and policy implementation. When it reopened 3 weeks later, it featured new signage emphasizing equal treatment, anonymous complaint systems, and clear accountability measures. Legal experts noted that the extensive documentation of this incident would serve as precedent for future discrimination cases. The combination of video evidence, witness testimony, and recorded admissions created an evidentiary standard that would make similar cases easier to prosecute. Civil rights organizations used the incident to push for stronger enforcement of public accommodation laws and increased penalties for discrimination. Zara's response became a model for how business leaders could address bias proactively rather than defensively. Zara's response to the incident went far beyond firing Victoria and implementing cosmetic changes. Within 2 months, Apex Airlines had become the industry leader in anti-discrimination policies and practices, setting new standards that other companies rushed to emulate. The company implemented mandatory bias training for all employees, but this wasn't typical corporate sensitivity training. Instead, Zara brought in experts who had lived experiences of discrimination to teach employees about the real-world impact of their decisions on customers and colleagues. Miguel Santos was promoted to Regional Customer Experience Manager, overseeing lounge operations across the western United States. His first initiative was creating peer support networks for employees who witnessed discrimination, ensuring that speaking up was supported rather than discouraged. Rebecca Walsh became Director of Training Development, working with Dr. Martinez to create educational programs that helped employees recognize and interrupt discriminatory behavior. Her personal transformation from complicit bystander to courageous ally made her uniquely qualified to help others make similar journeys. The company established an anonymous reporting system that allowed employees and customers to document discriminatory treatment without fear of retaliation. Reports were reviewed by an independent committee that included civil rights advocates and community leaders. James Peterson was promoted to Head of Security Training, developing protocols that ensured security personnel understood their legal obligations and moral responsibilities. His refusal to participate in Victoria's discrimination became a cornerstone of the training program. Apex Airlines became the first major carrier to implement real-time monitoring of customer service interactions using technology to flag potential discriminatory treatment for immediate management review. The system helped identify patterns of bias before they escalated to public incidents. The company established partnerships with historically black colleges and universities to recruit diverse talent for management positions. Zara understood that lasting change required diverse leadership, not just diverse training materials. Customer satisfaction scores improved dramatically as passengers of all backgrounds experienced genuinely welcoming service. The company's reputation evolved from cautionary tale to industry leader in inclusion and respect. Employee satisfaction also increased significantly. Staff members reported feeling more confident in their ability to provide excellent service when they weren't required to implement discriminatory policies or ignore problematic behavior from colleagues. The incident prompted broader industry changes as well. The International Air Transport Association adopted new guidelines for preventing discrimination in premium services. Airport authorities implemented oversight mechanisms to ensure equal treatment in airline lounges and other facilities. Congressional hearings resulted in new federal requirements for discrimination reporting and prevention in the transportation industry. Victoria's case was cited repeatedly as an example of why stronger enforcement was necessary. Other companies across various industries began implementing similar accountability measures, recognizing that the combination of social media documentation and legal consequences made discrimination an unacceptable business risk. Zara's approach to addressing discrimination became a Harvard Business School case study, demonstrating how leaders could turn crisis into opportunity for meaningful organizational change. The Premium Sky Lounge that had been the site of Victoria's discrimination became a model facility regularly hosting tours for other companies seeking to understand best practices in inclusive customer service. 6 months after the incident, Zara stood in the same premium sky lounge where Victoria had tried to humiliate her. But everything had changed. The staff was diverse, welcoming, and trained to treat every passenger with dignity. The atmosphere was still luxurious, but it was no longer exclusive in the discriminatory sense that Victoria had enforced. Miguel approached her with the quarterly customer satisfaction report, his face beaming with pride. "Zara, we've achieved the highest customer satisfaction scores in company history. More importantly, we haven't had a single discrimination complaint in 4 months." Rebecca joined them carrying a folder of training materials she had developed. "We've trained over 3,000 employees in the new protocols, and the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. People want to do the right thing. They just needed clear guidance and support." James Peterson arrived with his security report. "All security protocols are being applied equally across all customer demographics. We've eliminated disparate treatment entirely, and customer feedback reflects increased confidence in our fairness." Carlos Rivera, who had become a friend and advocate, entered the lounge for his weekly business trip to New York. "Zara, the difference is remarkable. This place feels welcoming to everyone now." Amanda Foster, whose live stream had helped document the original incident, was filming a follow-up story about the transformation. "Dr. Mitchell, this lounge has become a symbol of what's possible when leaders prioritize inclusion over exclusivity." Dr. William and Margaret Patterson, who were traveling to visit their grandchildren, stopped to speak with Zara. "Sweetheart, you've created something beautiful here. Not just a nice lounge, but a model for how people should treat each other." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a young black woman with her teenage daughter, both traveling to the daughter's college orientation. They approached the desk with the slight hesitation that Zara recognized from her own experience navigating predominantly white spaces. But instead of suspicion or scrutiny, they were greeted with genuine warmth. Miguel personally welcomed them. Rebecca ensured they were comfortable, and James made sure they felt secure. The transformation was complete. Zara watched this interaction with deep satisfaction. This was why she had acquired Apex Airlines. Not for profit or power, but to create spaces where dignity was universal and respect was guaranteed. The young woman's mother caught Zara's eye and mouthed thank you, somehow recognizing that the welcoming environment they were experiencing was the result of someone's hard work and sacrifice. Zara nodded back, understanding, passing between two women who had navigated discrimination and emerged stronger. Later that evening, Zara received a call from David Thompson with news that their anti-discrimination initiatives had been recognized by the NAACP with their Corporate Responsibility Award. The incident that could have destroyed the company had instead transformed it into an industry leader. But the most meaningful recognition came in simpler forms. The thank you notes from passengers who felt welcomed, the pride in employees' voices when they described their workplace, the knowledge that discrimination was no longer tolerated in any form. Victoria Pemberton, meanwhile, had pleaded guilty to civil rights violations and was serving a 1-year federal sentence while facing ongoing civil litigation. Her career in hospitality was permanently ended, and she had become a cautionary tale about the consequences of discrimination. The incident had cost Victoria everything: her career, her reputation, her financial security, and her freedom. But it had given Apex Airlines something invaluable: the opportunity to become the company it claimed to be. As Zara prepared to board her flight to New York, she reflected on the journey from that humiliating day when Victoria had tried to deny her basic respect to this moment when the lounge represented genuine inclusion and dignity for all. The fight against discrimination was far from over, but this battle had been won decisively. And the victory belonged not just to Zara, but to every employee who had found the courage to speak up, every passenger who had refused to be a silent witness to injustice, and everyone who believed that respect should be universal rather than conditional. Change was possible. Justice could prevail. And dignity, once defended, could transform not just individuals, but entire institutions. The plane that took off that evening carried more than passengers. It carried proof that when good people refuse to accept discrimination, even the most entrenched bias can be overcome. Victoria Pemberton was convicted on federal civil rights charges and sentenced to 18 months in prison, followed by 2 years of probation and community service focused on civil rights education. The federal judge noted that her behavior represented institutional discrimination at its most blatant, and hoped the sentence would deter similar conduct by others in positions of customer-facing authority. Her civil lawsuit with Zara was settled for an undisclosed amount that legal experts estimated exceeded $500,000, effectively bankrupting her and ensuring she would never work in customer service again. Miguel Santos was promoted to Vice President of Customer Experience for the Western region, becoming the youngest executive in Apex Airlines history to reach that position. His transformation from assistant manager to corporate leader became an inspirational story shared throughout the company. Rebecca Walsh completed her MBA with company support and now leads Apex's national training initiative, helping other businesses develop authentic inclusion programs rather than superficial compliance measures. The Premium Sky Lounge incident sparked industry-wide changes that extended far beyond aviation. Hotels, restaurants, retail stores, and other customer-facing businesses implemented new training programs and accountability measures. Congress passed the Customer Dignity Act, which strengthened federal protections against discrimination in public accommodations and increased penalties for violations. Zara testified before the Senate Commerce Committee, and her recommendations became the foundation for new federal guidelines that transformed customer service standards across multiple industries. This story changed how I think about power privilege and the responsibility we all have to speak up against injustice. When I first heard about Zara Mitchell's experience at that airport lounge, I thought it was just another unfortunate story about discrimination in travel. But the more I learned about how she handled the situation, the more I realized this wasn't just about one woman being mistreated. It was about how institutional bias gets challenged, how change happens, and what real leadership looks like when it matters most. 3 lessons from Zara's story that apply to all of us. First, dignity under pressure reveals character. Zara never lost her composure, never returned hostility with hostility, never let Victoria's discrimination turn her into something she wasn't. When someone tries to diminish your humanity, your response defines you more than their actions define them. Staying calm isn't weakness, it's strategic strength. It exposes their unreasonableness while preserving your integrity. Second, allies matter more than authority. Miguel didn't have the power to overrule Victoria, but his willingness to speak up gave other witnesses permission to act. Carlos started recording. Rebecca found her conscience. Dr. Patterson provided legal perspective. Margaret offered moral support. James refused illegal orders. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is witness injustice and say, "This isn't right." Your voice might be the one that tips the scale. Third, real change requires more than firing bad actors. Zara could have simply terminated Victoria and moved on. Instead, she used the incident to examine entire company practices, retrain thousands of employees, implement new oversight mechanisms, and create industry-leading inclusion standards. When you have the power to create change, think beyond individual accountability to institutional transformation. The uncomfortable truth this story reveals. Most discrimination isn't this dramatic or well-documented. It's subtle glances, longer waits, dismissive tones, and unequal treatment that's hard to prove but impossible to ignore. If you're experiencing this, know that your feelings are valid even when others can't see what you're experiencing. Document what you can find witnesses when possible, and remember that change often starts with one person refusing to accept the unacceptable. For those who look like me and might not face this discrimination directly, don't wait for permission to be an ally. Carlos's recording provided crucial evidence. Amanda's social media amplified the story. The Pattersons' witness testimony carried judicial weight. Small acts of solidarity can have massive impact. Use your privilege to amplify voices that are being silenced. If you're in leadership positions, remember that policies are only as good as the culture that implements them. Victoria used her authority to discriminate while hiding behind fake procedures and selective enforcement. Regular training, accountability measures, anonymous reporting systems, and empowering employees to speak up aren't just legal requirements, they're moral necessities. My challenge to you: next time you witness unfair treatment, whether it's obvious discrimination, subtle bias, or simple disrespect, ask yourself what action you can take. Record evidence if appropriate. Speak up when safe to do so. Offer support to those being targeted. Sometimes bearing witness is enough to change the dynamic entirely. For anyone who's faced discrimination, your experience matters. Your dignity is non-negotiable and you deserve better. Dr. Mitchell's story shows that staying professional doesn't mean staying silent. Document incidents, know your rights, find allies, and remember that responding with integrity often creates more change than responding with anger. Zara Mitchell reminds us that true power isn't about the badge on your chest, the title on your business card, or the money in your account. It's about how you treat people when you think no one important is watching, and how you respond when you realize that everyone is always important. Victoria learned this lesson the hard way, but her consequences created opportunities for thousands of others to be treated with the respect they deserved. What about you? Have you witnessed discrimination in airports, hotels, restaurants, or other service settings? How did you respond, and what would you do differently now? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might inspire someone else to speak up when it matters most. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about justice, dignity, and the power of refusing to accept the unacceptable. Until next time, remember, respect isn't earned by your status in life, it's owed to your humanity.